What's up there, my friend? Before we do anything, listen to this good vibes word here. Listen closely. Because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. Philippians 1 from 5. Good episode. Here we normally read from this good book of wisdom, the guide of life. The reason for that is because you acknowledge God Almighty and the Creator as the executive producer of this show. And now, my friend, this show is about spreading love, peace, honesty, forgiveness, and unity to the whole world. And we do that, my friend, by reacting together to good vibes videos from wonderful souls from different places of the world, my friend. So kindly, I would request you to hit that subscribe button and join us on this mission. Hit also the like button and leave your comments. I am worth you and 1H, and I really love you. And my friend, let's give thanks to our Creator before we dive in. Thank you, Lord Father, for this day. Thank you for your goodness and love. Thank you for this fruit that we have, Father, and everything that shall be involved through the videos. Guide us through, Father, and help us to spread love to the whole world. Forgive us all our sins and fill us with your Spirit. In Jesus' mighty name, we do pray, trusting and believing. Amen. Let's dive in good very soon. Lots of love to you. Thank you. My friend.
The pleasant smell that comes after the rain is caused by a group of bacteria known as actinomycetes. These bacteria grow in soil when conditions are damp and warm. When the soil dries out, the bacteria produce spores in the soil. When the raindrops hit the ground, these spores are kicked up, and they become airborne. The moist air easily carries the spores to us, so we breathe them in. But the smell isn't caused by the spores themselves. It's rather caused by a chemical excreted during the production of the spores known as geosmin. This chemical is responsible for the sweet smell after the rain. The human nose is extremely sensitive to geosmin. Some people can detect geosmin at concentrations as low as 5 parts per trillion. Since bacteria thrive in moist soil but release the spores once the soil dries out, the smell is most acute after a rain that follows a dry spell, although you'll notice it to some degree after most rainstorms. Interestingly, more aerosol is released in light rain than during a heavy downpour. Another pleasant after-the-rain smell comes from volatile oils that various plants and trees release. These oils collect in the environment, and when it rains, certain chemicals that make up the oils get released into the atmosphere, usually along with geosmin, causing a familiar and inviting scent.
Here's how you can cast a rope into a tree and lock it in place, so you can use it as a rope ladder to climb up. And then when you're done, you could get your whole rope back easily. So first, casting your rope above a high up branch will leave you with 2 dangling ends. Choose one of the ends and fold your rope up into this S shape, and wrap that lower rope behind and around twice. And now just feed that top loop through the bottom, and you've tied an inline loop knot known as the double dragon. Now with the other dangling end, feed it through that loop. As you continue pulling, that loop will climb to the top and lock in place. So now the rope is anchored. For the footholds, tie some more double dragons in the same way. My YouTube channel has the full tutorial on this knot. With a few of them in line, you could climb up like a rope ladder. When you get back down, reverse thread the knots to undo them. And to get your rope back, switch over to your non-tensioned line, and pulling on this will release the anchor and bring the loop down to you, allowing your entire line to be retrievable.
Now, you know, you're a learned man, that if someone says Earth's orbit is a circle, you're going to say no.
It's an ellipse.
And you're going to tell me it's an ellipse, a slightly flattened circle.
Right.
Okay. Let me tell you that Earth is like a 3% ellipse.
Okay.
So if I drew it, and then if I drew a 3% ellipse, and then I drew a more elongated ellipse, and I said, which one best approximates Earth's orbit, you're probably going to point to the more elongated one.
Of course.
Because you heard that it's an ellipse.
Also, that's the visuals that you are presented with when you look at orbits.
Exactly. But I'm just saying but the 3% ellipse, if you draw it and at a glance, it looks like a perfect circle.
Okay.
So, but you're right.
But but wait, let me just back this up for 1 second for my own comfort. the actual orbit is indeed a 3% ellipse. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Well, that changes everything because that looks like a circle.
It looks like a circle. If you're only 3% different in one direction than the other direction,
Right.
are you even going to notice that?
Not really.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yes, actually that. So I can draw that and draw a more elongated one. Almost everybody's going to point to the elongated one. Yeah, we know. It's showing off that they know that we're in an ellipse.
Right.
Okay. And they'll be wrong in so doing. Okay. So now you come out of the cave and you say, okay, I got it. It's a circle. Okay. Is there more? I said, yes. It's not actually a circle. Okay. It moves a little closer to the sun and a little farther away. And we have a word for that. It's called an ellipse. And we can watch that happen. Okay. So at this time of year, measure the size of the sun on the sky. I'll give them a little tool to do that. And wait 6 months later and you find out it's smaller. All right. So we are closest to the sun in January and farthest from the sun in July. Okay. And January is called perihelion and July is called aphelion. There you go. All right. And people say, well, wait a minute. If we're closest to the sun in January, how come it's colder? What? All that means is a temperature on Earth has nothing to do with how far away we are from the sun. Okay.
Let me guess. I'm taking a guess here. So because the Earth sits on a tilt of 23 degrees, it's not about how close we are. It's about where the sun is hitting us on that tilt.
Correct. And so if you're tilted towards the sun, the rays are much more direct.
Wait a minute. Did you just say correct?
Yes, I did. That's exactly correct.
Get out.
So Earth and the moon orbit each other.
Okay.
Okay, so we're not just sitting in one place with moon going around us. The moon and Earth each orbit their common center of mass.
Okay.
Okay. Now, obviously, the center of mass is going to be much closer to Earth because Earth has more mass. Right. And this is, even if it sounds a little weird, it's completely intuitive. If you walk up to a barbell and there are more weights on one side than the other, and I ask, where would you have to pick it up so that you balanced it? You'd have to pick
it up closer to the heavy side.
Closer to the heavy side, and then you can get a balance point on that. And that's true for anything you pick up.
Absolutely.
Right, if you want to find the balance point. So what that means is Earth's path around the sun is not a circle. It's not an ellipse. It's a loop-de-loop.
Oh, because it's doing the little merry-go-round dance with the moon.
It's doing the moon. It's doing the moon jiggle.
Right.
Okay. And by the way, that center of mass is 1,000 miles beneath Earth's surface, in a line connecting the center of the Earth to the center of the moon. So the Earth is not doing this. It's not doing this. It's like doing this. So yes, it's basically a circle. It's also basically an ellipse, but on top of that ellipse are these loop-de-loops.
Right.
Okay. And not only that, okay, the path that Earth takes around the sun does not rejoin itself in the same spot. So in other words, it's not a closed orbit.
No.
All right.
Right.
So for example, the point where we are closest to the sun, that actually shifts every single year and migrates around the sun. It's called a precession. And so the real truth is deeper and more complex and more interesting than typically whatever is taught on the first round. That's all I'm saying. And that is true for almost everything that's taught.
Right.
So I'll give you one more example before we got to land this plane. So if you ask me, how wide is the sun?
Okay. How wide is the sun?
On this, it's 864,000 miles across.
Okay.
Okay. Not quite 1 million miles across.
All right.
All right. And that's fine. And if you look it up in a book, it'll give you that number. But wait a minute. The sun is a ball of gas.
Right.
So where is the edge? How are you doing the edge of that? How is that? You say, okay, well, you take a picture and you put a thing. Okay. Well, whose edge is that? That edge that you see is the last point of light that had scattered on its way to the edge and then escaped the sun. But that's visible light.
Right.
Okay. Other wavelengths of light emanate from the sun at different depths.
Ah.
So if you took an X-ray picture of the sun, you'll get a different dimension for how big the sun is than if you take an ultraviolet or an infrared. So when you just say how big is the sun, you can get an answer that satisfies most needs. But if you really want to know what's going on, you have to get into the weeds.
Right.
And you've got to dig in and then say, how are you defining it? And how does that vary? And how big is that difference? And there are some stars that actually pulsate. And to say how big is the star, you have to say, well, ask me when. Where in its cycle do you want to know how big it is?
Right.
Most variable stars in the night sky, the category of star called variable because they get brighter and dimmer over on a schedule, right? They get bigger and smaller. So some questions don't just have simple answers.
What is so critically important about what you are saying is that when we look at the scientific method and we look at science itself, what it does is it allows you to open your mind to the possibilities of change. And the rigid thinking that most people adopt and say it is either this or that.
Or they think scientists have rigid thinking. Right.
We know more, so we change the way we present information based upon an increase in knowledge or an availability of more information.
Correct. And so that's all correct. But an important difference, in most cases, there are counterexamples to this, but in most cases, the extra information is an improvement on what you previously knew.
Right.
It doesn't completely throw away what was previously learned or understood or researched. So that's why I said with the orbit around the sun, each next thing is a nuance on the previous one.
I have got a really easy hack for you. After you eat something that's high in carbs or sugars that would cause a big glucose spike, you can actually use your calf muscles to reduce that spike. So stay seated and do calf raises for about 10 minutes. And as you can see, the effect is very dramatic. And that's because your calf contains a muscle called the soleus muscle, which is excellent at soaking up glucose from your bloodstream.
This is a flower you gotta grow. How to make the tea and all the healing benefits. This is the Plumeria. The Plumeria are also known as the frangipani, the most beautiful flower, at least according to the Hawaiians. Any Hawaiians out there? This plant has glucosides. That's what's in here, this milky stuff. No, this is not toxic. This is incredibly moisturizing. It's so moisturizing, it's so good for you that skincare companies use it as a skincare secret. This is magical stuff, but it doesn't just stop there. We're gonna make the tea. Oh yeah, and by the way, to make a new plant, all you gotta do is plant this. Just make sure you get good soil contact, and that is it. These smell absolutely incredible. It's a smell that you just have to grow one. To make the tea, all you do is get some flowers. By the way, there's a bunch of different color flowers. You can go yellow, red, pink. Put your flowers in your cup. Boil you some water. This tea effectively relieves inflammatory induced back pain. Headaches, the longer you steep it, the stronger it gets. I think 15 minutes is plenty. It tastes a lot like jasmine, but so much better. A lot of teas that are good for you taste disgusting. This tea is amazing.
Even if you're not into drawing or anatomy, it's going to be difficult not to find this cool. So there's a number called phi. It's 1.618. And some people call it the golden number. And it's based on the Fibonacci numbers 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. What's really cool about this sequence is that when you look at the bones of the hand, they follow these numbers. Some people call it the divine proportion. So using your fingernail as a unit of 1, the first bone, the one at the tip of your finger, the distal phalanx, that's unit of 2, so it's 2 fingernails long. The middle phalanx is 3, the proximal phalanx is 5, and then the metacarpal, the one you can't see because it's in the palm of your hand, that one's 8. So if you did find that cool and you like the content, please leave me a comment.
I don't like sand batteries. This is a sand battery. It's a way to store the energy from things like solar panels and windmills. It's literally just a big container filled with sand. And how it operates is basically the same idea as your toaster. Buried in your big pile of sand, you have metal rods. And when you have excess energy on sunny or windy days, you pump that extra energy into these metal rods, heating them up. And the cool thing about sand is it's very good at holding onto heat, and you need thousands of degrees to melt it. So, if you have a ton of excess energy, you can heat this pile up to ridiculous temperatures. Okay, so what's your point? You have a big pile of hot sand now. Well, at its simplest form, a sand battery can be used to heat your home in the winter. A more advanced idea is using that heat to create steam, which you then use to generate power. Now that I've explained what it is, I'll explain why I don't like it. Sand batteries are great for large projects. I'm a self-reliant homesteader. You as an individual will not be generating enough electricity to make it worthwhile.
Silk is not a fabric. If you thought it was, what you're probably actually thinking of is satin, which can be made from silk, or in this case, it's made from polyester. Silk is a fiber. It comes from silkworms, and it can be used to make a variety of fabrics, including satin, organza, taffeta, and more.
Here are some of the craziest lies in history. So Rachel Dolezal, a white woman, pretended to be black for years and even became the president of a chapter of the NAACP. Ali Dia faked being a professional soccer player by convincing Southampton in the English Premier League that he was a cousin of soccer star George Welsh. Somehow he was signed and even played in a match where he quickly revealed himself to be a fraud. Enrique Marco falsely claimed to be a Holocaust survivor and even gave numerous speeches and wrote books about his experience, while Tanya Head falsely claimed to be a 9/11 survivor, even becoming the president of a survivors network before it was revealed that her entire story was fabricated. Clark Rockefeller lied about being a member of the Rockefeller family and successfully passed off as one for a decade, marrying into high society before getting caught. Fred DeMuro was a professional con artist who lied about being a monk, prison warden, and most famously a surgeon in the Royal Canadian Navy. He actually performed surgeries and treated patients during the Korean War. And finally, Brian McKinnon was a 30-year-old who lied about his age so he could re-enroll in high school at 17 years old to participate in sports and other extracurricular activities. Lock him up.
So I got out of my hospital bed and I noticed a chip on the bottom side of my wrist. A chip, and what I assumed that chip was for monitoring my heart rate and all the other vitals. So I got up out of my hospital bed and I walked up to the window. I opened the window and I saw a city. It ain't like any other city I've ever seen before. This city was very large. I saw vehicles flying at the tops of the skyscrapers. I had to leave. I had to see what was going on. At this time, I began to accept my fate. I may never see my wife again. So I walked to the door of that hospital room, and I found that it was unlocked. So I opened the door. I was still wearing the same exact clothes in which I was wearing in the year 1981. I walked out of that room and I walked down a long hallway. I noticed an elevator. And the elevator looked nearly the exact same as the elevators that you see today. The buttons maybe looked a little bit more futuristic. But apart from that, it looked like any standard elevator. I got in that elevator and I hit the button to go to floor 1. Apparently I was on floor 6. I will admit the elevator was quite fast and I was on floor 1 before I knew it. The glass doors of the elevator opened and I saw the lobby of this hospital in which I was in. Nearly everybody appeared to be dressed in white. They were all wearing white clothes, and they appeared to be looking at me strangely. I went up to the front desk of this hospital, and I asked the lady who was standing there, who was wearing all blue. The patients appeared to be all wearing white clothes, but this lady who was working at the front desk was wearing all blue. And it appeared as if all the other hospital employees were also wearing these blue uniforms. Not like the blue uniforms you'd see in a hospital today. They were blue long-sleeve shirts, blue pants of the same color. And I asked the lady, "Where am I?" And she tells me, "You're in District 508. And I said, "District 508? What does that mean?" And she says, "What do you mean, what does that mean?" "Well, you're in District 508. I began to question everything. Where was I? I went up to the front of the hospital. I went to the front doors, which were sliding glass doors, and they opened automatically when I walked through. And I saw them, and I realized I was on the outskirts of the city. This city with buildings I ain't never seen before. And I saw a sign saying District 508. And at the bottom of the sign, I read in very small text. It said, District 508 of the Yavis Empire. I realized I was not in the United States. I was in a new place. I didn't know what this Yavis Empire meant. But I knew I had to come home. So I walked around the city a bit. It's a very strange city. I looked above me and I could see buses floating in the sky. I wasn't sure about how any of the technology worked, but I saw buses and cars flying in the sky above me. The streets down low were open. You could walk. Anybody could walk, and it was full of pedestrians and people biking but there was no cars at the base level. All the cars and all the other transportation was above, going in between the skyscrapers. And much of the skyscrapers appeared to be made of glass. They were all very transparent. And they were all very tall, much taller than any skyscraper you'd see in New York. So I realized I was in the year 2118. In accordance to seeing people on these giant sidewalks or streets, I also saw robots. And such robots appeared to be floating a foot or two off the ground. And they appeared to look quite like humans, except they didn't have legs and they were floating up off the ground. I went up to a random man on the street, and I says to him, "You need to listen to me. I know you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I'm a time traveler." And he simply says to me, "Okay," as if he hears it every day. And I asks him,
SpaceX won't tell us how exactly they're able to live stream back to Earth from a moving rocket booster, but their request documents for the FCC can, and it's pretty interesting. SpaceX live streams their launches from the rocket. How?
I really wanted to know this, so I went to Stack Exchange, and someone named Bob Jacobson answered this. Anytime you're doing anything over radios, you have to file paperwork with the FCC. So it turns out SpaceX filed the plans for how they were going to do the video. They have these special digital video transmitters that broadcast on 2 frequency bands at the same time by a company called Quasonics. It's right around 2 gigahertz. It's not 2.4 gigahertz, right? And they beam down the video on both channels at once. So it's a real problem on a rocket, both because it's moving fast and those flames coming out of the bottom of the rocket are plasma. They're making static, radio static. So it's really tough. So to make sure the video gets through, they send it twice. And so they're receiving on both bands and putting it together. So any bits that get through, they combine. And that's how they managed to get that video.
Redundancy.
Redundancy.
I mean, that's what the BBC is using.
Right, right. Nick Garnett, we had him on, we interviewed him a while ago, and he was talking about how when they send people out of the radio station to do man-on-the-street interviews or go cover live sports events, they take a Raspberry Pi, they put Speedify on it, they'll hang off 3 cellular modems and connect their computer to that. So then they're out live streaming and on all 3 modems, deliver whichever one gets through first. They can have 1 or 2 modems completely stop working, and we just grab the fastest, lowest latency packet that's right and send it through so they can have all kinds of terrible things happen.
Going back to the SpaceX launch, you mentioned that they use radio waves. I've seen on the Starlink website the satellite communicate with space lasers. Are they in the mix at all?
At the beginning, the way it worked with SpaceX, it was radio waves up to the satellite that bounced them down to you for your internet. And it worked awesome. But there had to be a base station close to you. There was something usually within 100 miles, and that's why there were, even though it was satellites, there were some spots they covered and some spots they didn't. Well, now they can beam it up to one of the satellites, and the satellites can send a laser through space to another satellite that's over an area that they don't have a base station. This is how they service the airplanes in the middle of the Atlantic, the ships in the middle of the Pacific. Going radio up to the satellite, and then the satellite is bouncing lasers to the other satellites until it finally comes down to the ground.
Is that Li-Fi or is that something different?
I believe it's something different. So Li-Fi is the standard that got announced a few years ago for doing internet over light. They talked about smart light bulbs beaming internet to your laptop at faster speeds than Wi-Fi could go at. I don't see any products at all for sale for consumers to use this stuff. If you look at the Li-Fi website, they say it's actually being used by some airplane companies to beam internet to airplanes as they fly by. But it doesn't actually say lasers, and certainly SpaceX doesn't say that they're using Li-Fi. So I think it's something different, but probably some similar concepts.
Like a thought for more connectivity knowledge.
Heyo, guess who just drove 15 hours just to find out the monolith's not even here anymore? 15 hours just to find out the monolith's not even here anymore.
uninvited.
De lo que todos dicen que imanes y no sé qué. Estoy prácticamente enfrente de él.
Oh my god. Guess what, my friends? On some place, they were recorded 2 moons on their place on that day. I don't know which place this is, but it is recent. On September of 2024, my friend. Guy, how can people have 2 moons? Is this normal? Or the sun that day decided to go undercover and come back as another moon? Yeah? This is something crazy. What had happened there? Good people of Earth,